You are suddenly the president of the US. What is your first action? Many guys, lots of people have to die or step down before citizens become president, and even if it was selected randomly or in an order, surely tons of other people will go before you, like, even the mayor of DC. I assume that would be the first mayor to become president after all the senators and Congress. Does DC have a mayor even? Would be really far down the list. Require all elected officials at all levels to take remedial elementary school. They would learn how to share and get along with others, basic math and place value. People don't realize exactly how big a billion or trillion is. Reading comprehension and critical thinking, science and critical thinking, history, social studies, and critical thinking. Lots of critical thinking. A foreign language. They can make the population healthier through their example. Technology. It's amazing how many elementary students understand computers better than Congress. They'd also have to do that project where you have to make a budget to live in your area with the random job. It might help them see how normal people live. Executive order. Defund and shut down the war on drugs. Indefinitely withholding funds that Congress appointed hasn't been a presidential power since Nixon. Use the funds to provide treatment for those caught up in addiction. Just illegal. Pardon all those who were caught up in the war itself, accepting the truly dangerous, and contracts with the private prisons currently warehousing these people. State offenses, irrelevant. Push to pass the 28th Amendment, which is aimed to end corruption in our government, which includes but not limited to, real campaign contribution limitations and PACs and super PACs reduce salaries to reflect the average median income of the country, term limits. Also, end marijuana prohibition and make it fully legal across the whole country. Also, cut business ties with any country that uses forced slave labor. Possibly even implement that if you want to sell your products in the USA, it need to be manufactured here, where we have an EPA that will do its job to regulate emissions and be the example to the world that we do care about environment and planet. Edit. American-based companies have to manufacture their product in the United States using American workers. All of that in one amendment makes no sense. It's really just several laws, not an amendment. One of the reasons government officials are paid so much is to keep them from taking bribes. Another reason federal politicians need to be paid more is they are required to maintain a residence in two places, their home constituency and DC. That said, we could definitely end them getting their full salary and benefits for life even after meeting term limits or getting voted out. Get together with other allied nations and financially bury China. They tried to do that to us in 2008 to 2009 with the formation of BRIC and undermining our currency, lied, cheated, and stolen everything that wasn't nailed down. I'd ban all Chinese companies from doing business here and force them to do it like American companies have to do in China, forced sharing IP, giving up stakes in the business, etc. Circumventing this will mean a complete confiscation of all assets and a worldwide ban on everyone involved in the country from traveling using passports, with the agreement of allied nations. Let's see how these weasel cocksuckers like it. It immediately make unnecessary plastic illegal. This includes plastic on individually wrapped silverware, and produce, like oranges, bananas, apples, stuff that has natural skin. This would also include ridiculously large and separate packaging for the smallest delivery, like a box the size of a refrigerator full of bubble wrap just for hand lotion, or a box for each one of your shoes. The soda rings that take wire cutters to break. Why they thought that was a good idea. It also make plastic grocery bags recyclable at the least. BC, I know how useful those can be. However, I would encourage the use of cloth bags. Not to mention this would also include things that shouldn't be plastic to begin with, like bed frames, coffee containers, razors, coat hangers, etc. You get the idea. Plastic bad. Throwaway account because I might become controversial. First things first. A new way of seeing things, rights and equality. It will be sanctioned that all race will be removed from everything. Whatever color of the rainbow you are, you will be classed as human. No one must be classed by black man or white woman. It is either a male or female. and skin color is not to be spoken about. Next on the list, we will be removing all gender dividedness. No company will be allowed to separate wages and tasks depending on the person's gender. All LGBTQ rights will be granted. A third, even fourth bathroom will be mandated. Trans female and trans male bathrooms will be created. If companies do not adhere to this, they can get fined. Any and all religious groups will be allowed, provided it is not pushed onto the government or is not thrown into another U.S. citizen's face. Registering any form of business or company, the owner, CEO will sign a waiver with the government stating that they will not discriminate anyone based on sexual orientation, religion, or any other factor. And right of administration is reserved for more harsher criminal acts or behavior. Funding and financials. All tax expenditure by the government will be an open book, viewable online by any U.S. citizen with the valid SS number. Every member of government, including the president, will be given the same house and vehicle funding no matter position and should not exceed that of a middle to upper class lifestyle. Their personal tax and budgets will be made available to Congress and anyone who would like to audit information. All NPOs that feed poor, look after homeless and care for the elderly will need to disclose expenditure and show reasons for it, or else they will need to reapply as a corporation and will be banned from nonprofits. Any and all religious groups will be taxed on tithe or its respected form of donations, and this will be audited by government to ensure they are not using the money unwise. The higher you earn, the higher the tax will be implemented to make earnings more equal. However, pay grades are still allowed. And under company digression, companies will be required to pay minimum wage that is valued per state's percent of housing, vehicle, and living costs. Other phases and policies. Power will be slowly converted to solar and any and all renewable energy. As this is phased in, the price of utilities will decrease over time to accommodate. Social grants and government aid will be given with the inclusion of community service as a form of employment. Homeless will be transported to rehabilitation centers to manage any mental issues and then will be given community service work for payments. Any and all food and human biological research will be conducted and the healthiest diet for human survival will be mandated. The sale of cigarettes will be allowed with the registered card that matches the person buying them. They will also be limited per person per month. This card will also need to be registered and approved by a doctor. This will be followed by an anti-cigarette campaign to eliminate smoking. The same as above will be placed on alcohol. And bars, clubs and taverns will need to adhere to no drunken rule. De-alcoholized drinks will be promoted. The 2 points above will be provided with free health assistance from the state. Healthcare will be a top priority, and 90% of fees will be paid though taxes and lowered officials' income. Any and all state and Congress member will need to use government and state facilities. Universities will be given access to funding to allow for more medical and scientific research to better the country. Any form of weapon needs to be. Foreign policy. We will acquire peace with all nations. Any nation that does not want peace will be prohibited from the USA. Without a specific reason, there will be a easy-to-follow but tight immigration system to follow. While we welcome immigrants, we will make sure you are squeaky clean before entering. Otherwise, I am sure there is so much more we could do. The ultimate plan is to create a society based on people for people and by people. We welcome anyone and everyone. But just be nice. Bro, do you realize that's gonna raise the death rate by 100%, right? Not to mention that alcohol is legal and we still have thousands of car crashes and other deaths resulting from it every year. It's not like legalizing drugs is gonna automatically make them safe. The best thing to do is keep them illegal, but remove jail time for drug users and instead the punishment is forced rehab. So people still get help, and we prevent every other person from becoming a druggie. With testing stations and places they can consume safely. Most meth addicts aren't big on social responsibility. They aren't going to engage in their habit in a way that leads to fewer deaths. Forced rehab won't do shit. Portugal has decriminalized but not legalized, if I understand correctly. And it has worked out pretty well. You get caught with hard drugs and yeah, you have to go to rehab. It keeps the jails free and is at least enough of a disincentive that people still keep their drug use somewhat discreet. It's not like legalizing drugs is gonna automatically make them safe. Yeah, I'm not saying it would, but it would be better in a regulated industry than in the hands of criminals. That's why it is easier for a lot of minors to get drugs than booze. Also, legality opens avenues for research and testing that can lead to harm reduction and possible therapeutic applications for these substances. Jailing people for using, possession doesn't help anything. Not at all how it works. When you legalize drugs, you take it out of the shadows and expose drug usage. People don't have to hide it as much, so they get noticed and other people can help keep them in check. It also means people are free to get help. If you will wind up in jail for going to the hospital, you don't go to the hospital. In addition, it removes the black market and all the violent crime associated with it. Most normal people aren't going to start doing heroin all of a sudden just because it is legal. The legality of drugs isn't what keeps people from using them. In fact, there are people who would be less likely to get into drugs if they were illegal because it wouldn't be an act of rebellion anymore. There would still be workplace restrictions for jobs that would be dangerous if drug users were doing them. It also means that there would be an industry around safe and responsible use, making it easier for people to get help. What about Portugal exactly? Drugs aren't legal in Portugal. They have only decriminalized the use of illicit drugs in small amounts. Unless the argument you're trying to make is that drug abuse should be seen as a medical issue, rather than a criminal one, in which case I would say somewhere in the middle is probably the best option. Having a free-for-all on drugs would bring many problems, least of which being a huge rise in crime initially as drugs start flooding into the country, causing gang violence, as it did in Portugal. I always notice Americans see Europe as some utopia where everything is awesome. It's not. It has its own problems. Cash has more overhead than electronic payments. It is theft-prone, shrink-prone, a disease vector, and requires pickup or deposit. Functionally, it is no different than a card to a legitimate business. As long as the processing fees are lower than the cost of using cash, you will see companies opt for card only. And companies don't really care that much about money printed by the government. I see more and more places accepting crypto. Besides, most consumers prefer to carry cards and not cash, for almost the exact same reasons, especially with credit card perks. I buy nearly everything on my credit card for points, miles and extended warranties, and then ACH my payment from checking, which is direct deposited. I almost never see cash anymore, and have gotten almost to the point I don't need to carry a wallet because of contactless payment. I don't think it is a battle you are going to win. Probably should just open a bank account. China only has small share our debt. 78% is public debt and 22% is intergovernmental debt. China currently holds about $1.1 trillion of the $28.1 trillion debt. Japan, the country who holds the most U.S. debt, holds just under $1.3 trillion. The rest of the debt is held by banks, pension funds, individuals, savings bonds, government pensions, through treasury bonds, and the Federal Reserve. Admit that our current system is unsustainable, and if we don't drastically cut every sector of government, we will soon have an economic disaster that makes the Great Depression look like a Sunday at the beach. Try to renegotiate and restructure the debt. Admit that we have been lying and propagandizing our citizens through the media. Allow for competing currencies. Eliminate nearly every bureaucratic institution. Institute a strict separation of church and state, and scientism and state. And institute common law practices, and promote common language in bills and government documents. Eliminate corporate tax. It's a farce anyway. No businessman worth his weight in salt is gonna shoulder the tax burden. They will pass it to consumers with raised prices or low quality, or cutting employees and worker benefits. Also, we will become way more competitive for manufacturing. Also, I would eliminate the income tax. Even if you are from Hong Kong, nukes on China would mean China nukes USA, Russia nukes USA, USA nukes Russia. From Germany, Russia nukes Germany, France and Britain nuke Russia, not even mentioning the Koreas, Ukraine, Middle East. Nearly every developed country goes to war. Wipeout of the human civilization. Would you really like that more than being harassed by a government that isn't legally allowed to? Not 100% sure if this would be in the scope of presidential powers, but let's just pretend it is. Drastically cut military spending, create a system of public works to repair rotting infrastructure, use now unspent military funds to create a universal healthcare system, reinstitute the fairness doctrine, and focus on improving educational standards throughout the country. Oh, and gun control. Offer the option of peaceful secession to the South and Texas. I think we'd all be happier if Alabama and California were not part of the same country. I don't think the South really brings much to the table other than obstructionism and cultural conflict. Most of them suck up more tax dollars in subsidies than they contribute. Let them go do their own thing. Reinstall more libertarian policies, lower taxes, get rid of as much bureaucracy as possible and stop subsidizing big corporations like Amazon or Walmart to make up employment rates. I'd like to de-escalate the army, but having a peek at the U.S. confidential intelligence would probably make me shiver, so I'd take a look at the health system. Also, I would try to switch from beef to more environmentally friendly alternatives like chicken, vegan meat and such. America needs a plan for cheaper vegetables. Also, I'd like to take a look at alien info. Who wouldn't be curious? Disband Congress and move to a 5-man system, ban political parties and only have independents, set the entry fee to political position at $5,000, ban all forms of donation. Anyone found corrupt serves 25 to life. Attempt to form a better relationship with Russia, China. Alter the military to be a large projected force from the U.S. Foreign wars now decided by national vote. Taxing churches eliminates separation of church and state. Universal health care for all will bankrupt America in less than a 4-year term. Raising minimum wage won't do anything. It'll simply drive prices higher. A better option would be to bring genuine value back to our currency by rebacking it with gold and silver. Case in point. Minimum wage in 1954 was just 5 silver quarters per hour. Today, those same 5 quarters have a melt value of approximately $25. That's not poor minimum wage, but severely devalued currency. How does taxing churches prevent the separation of church and state? I genuinely do not understand why religions should be treated charitably when they make money. The separation was presumably intended to ensure you don't have bishops etc. in the house, as we do in the UK. Make them pay. Universal healthcare hasn't bankrupted the rest of the Western world. So why is the USA so special? People and companies pay for healthcare, just as the rest of us, like Europe, did for years until we developed a fair healthcare system and, despite what you might think, it works. Divert those funds to a form of health tax. Anyway, your comments are moot because I am the president and I have decided. Purge the military of all soldiers loyal to the prior regime. Purge the courts of all judges loyal to the prior regime. Dial up the rhetoric against the other team, who I'd deposed from power. Set up one of the alphabet agencies, or the Capitol Police Force as a force dedicated to preserving elected members. Open offices for Capitol Police nationwide. Expand their mandate to prosecuting political speech. Set up a bureau or something to allow citizens to report their neighbors/family/friends for anti-party speech or actions. Once that's taken hold, tacitly condone attacking the other political team. Partner with Google/FB/Amazon to set up some sort of system whereby a person's actions, posts and speech, give them more or fewer privileges in the country, based on the content. Stuff that supports my party gets more privilege. Stuff that doesn't gets less. I establish a maximum income amount, including interest, dividend income and income from investments, of $500,000 a year. Any income over and above that gets confiscated from the government and spent on the people. Using I set up a migration and housing board. The I determines where populations are predicted to migrate, and prioritizes those areas for home and building construction, so there are houses available for people moving. Ban all private ownership of multiple properties. One is fine, but you can't sell it, nor leave it as inheritance. When the person on the deed dies, it goes back to the government. Use the housing board to guarantee every family or person has housing, regardless of employment status. And that's just a start. I have a bunch more ideas, but that's a good first 100 days.